I think I had a case where a company said, we will shut this place down if the union wins. That's an unfair labor practice. It was this small town down in Kentucky. There was one big employer, and the owner of the company drove this gigantic Cadillac, very well recognized. And the union was trying to stir up some support. They were meeting at the Holiday Inn. There's one Holiday Inn in town. Right next to the Holiday Inn was a Subway, and it's all glass, and you can see the owner in his big Cadillac sat his car at that Subway and did eat, but he sat there and watched everybody coming and going. I have to watch out what I say, right?
Welcome to the Cincinnati Business Podcast, where we give you practical tips and tricks to grow yourself and your business. And brought to you by the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. Kathy, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think this whole world is something actually kind of I don't understand a lot of, because I've never worked in like a larger corporate setting that would normally talk about things like the differences between where management and labor is inside of an organization. Now, for those people who don't know you, what is like important understanding about you and your work that people should know as we kind of launch into this conversation?
Gosh, it's a good question. I'll give you a little bit about my background. Is that okay? Yeah. This is a good story. The reason I got into labor management was I specifically remember my dad was an HR director for a large company here in Cincinnati. He had been with them almost 40 years when he retired, but they had 3 unions when he started out. And people are going to think I make this story up, but one of my most vivid memories as a child was my dad during labor negotiations. And he would go away every 3, 4, 5 years, depending how long the contract was, and be in a hotel for a few days and hammer out this contract. And one year, there was a bomb threat on our house here in lowly little Fort Wright, Kentucky, where I grew up. And it was nothing happened from it, right? But it was definitely connected somehow to these labor negotiations that were going on. So my dad had always told me he wishes he would have gone to law school. He has his master's in labor relations and had been in HR work. And so I really thought I was going to go into labor relations, HR work, and then but go to law school. So that's how I started. I started with my dad and kind of following in his footsteps of being in an HR role, and went to law school. And then right out of law school, I worked for the federal government's National Labor Relations Board, which is really a strange agency. And I'm pretty sure most of your listeners would have never heard of the NLRB. It's just not a very...
I had heard of it.
You had not?
I had heard of it.
Oh, you had? Okay.
Yes.
How have you heard of it?
Well, it feels like it pops up in political conversation here and there.
Yes, so, it's very political. It's one of the few... And also the laws change based upon who's in office, which is really hard to practice in because it's not just laws, it's more policy driven. Who's the general counsel, who's been appointed, and who's been appointed to the 5-member board. And it's just painful to keep up with as a practitioner. But I went and worked for him because, again, my dad said if I wanted to work in human resources and do it, go and practice. So I did, which you represent the unions mostly when you work for the board. You could represent the employer or the individual employee, but it's mostly kind of slanted towards the unions. And then, even stranger, I went and started to work in Frankfort as the director of HR for the state agencies under a former governor of Kentucky. So I went from, working in a federal agency to doing HR. Oh, what did I say? I went to law school in between there. I went to law school, then worked for the NLRB, and then as an HR director, which again, I started to just work in that role of working with employees. And Kentucky doesn't have unions, but has some of the same concepts of, government versus this group of employees, right? And so I kind of was that go-between. And then when we moved back up to Cincinnati, I went back to Dinsmore and Scholl, which is one of the largest employers of union law firms in the city. So then I started to 100% represent companies and the management side. So I've gone back and forth.
Yeah.
And in that time, I started to participate in this conference at NKU. So I was working full-time as an attorney, helping businesses work through union situations. So I think to your original question, what people want to know, at that point, I really did try to help companies say, we don't want unions. I'll be honest, right? We don't want them. They didn't. How do we do that legally? But I also saw that some of my clients had unions. And if they had a union, we don't need this strife. We don't need this back and forth every 3 years and have a bomb threat and different things. And so I did see that side of it as well. My clients that didn't want unions and my clients that had unions but wanted to work with them cooperatively. So I started to attend this labor management conference, and we probably don't have enough time in the next 3 sessions to explain how I got to teach at NKU full-time. But in the interim, I moved over to teaching full-time, working at the law firm part-time. And lo and behold, I started running this conference that I was attending 20 years before that.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
man.
I started to really, I actually spoke at the conference. I worked with some of the participants. And then when I came to start teaching, it kind of fell in my lap that they needed someone to run the conference itself. So all of these topics I worked in and really was participating in long before I started to take over and run it.
So you said your dad did this. And when was it kind of the moment where you realized that you were actually good at this too?
Well, again, he did a little different, but I do know just that human interaction. I've always been engaging with people, and my dad as well. And so I can't tell you probably a moment that pops out that I remember, but I do remember thinking, I like knowing what my dad does. He, he works with people. He's not working as an engineer, he doesn't do legal work, that type of legal work, but he's every day working with groups of people. At the time, like I said, he started out with lots of different unions. When he left, it had been down to one union, but not just the union side of people, but there was definitely non-union employees that he was always running, like the company picnics. I remember that. Like he would be at these company picnics and in charge of every employee there knew him, right? He wasn't necessarily the boss to any of them, but he worked with them all and made, he worked through their problems with them. He worked through the good things and the bad things at the company. So anyway, I've always liked that. So even though I do a little bit different than him, and now I teach it. I'm teaching HR majors. So I'm teaching, today I had a class, I taught employment law to my business law students, and a lot of my students are going into HR and, how they engage with employees, both legally, but also in a way to keep conflict out of the workplace.
Now, why did your dad say that he wished he went into law? What was different for him since he was already deeply steeped in all that stuff?
Yeah. Really, he felt like he always had to reach out to someone and ask them for help when he wishes he could have answered some of the questions on his own. I remember him telling me that some of the especially the lawsuits that would come towards the company, harassment. It was a big time, from sexual harassment lawsuits, gender discrimination things. I'm trying to think of a good one that he maybe have told me, although I have to watch out what I say, right? But anyway, different things that he always was reaching out to a lawyer, getting a company lawyer involved, and he probably wishes he could have done it himself, some of those type of things. But just really understanding the legal process more. He got the human side of things, but he wanted to understand the process better, and he always had to go to someone outside to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so then you get your JD, then you go to the NLRB, and you're kind of in this kind of enforcement role in a way.
Yeah.
What is it that you're enforcing, generally speaking? Is it these ever-changing rules that people are struggling to keep up with, or is it even more malicious things?
There were definitely some malicious things that came across my desk. As fresh out of law school, I'll tell you, there's twofold what you enforce there. You enforce the right to be able to choose a union. So we did a lot of elections, which was actually my most favorite thing to do. We would go out and run elections. So at least 2 or more employees choose to vote for a union. The employer has to allow the labor board to come in and run an election. And I went to elections all over. I went to one in a coal mine down in Ashland, Kentucky, and we had an election for 7 people. The union won. You have to have a 50% or more vote of those who vote in the election. So they still use paper ballots even today. The NLRB does. I mean, you go and you fill out a yes or no on a small little sheet of paper, and you stick it in. At the end of it, the agent, me, would open it up and Yes, no, yes, no. So anyway, that was one big thing. That was our enforcing the right to be able to choose or not choose a union. And you have to remember that. I say it's definitely the labor board has its, pro-union side of things, but it allows you employees to vote yes or no, right? But it gives you that right. So that's the number one. The enforcement, usually they're called ULPs, unfair labor practices. And there are some unfair labor practices that unions do, but typically it's a union filing charges against the employer. And there are some malicious allegations, you've interfered with our right to vote. So I have to say probably the most malicious I've seen is a company, trying to interfere with that legal process of voting in an election. Is it giving misinformation? Is it, not allowing the union to give out information?
Yeah.
You name it. There's some ways that employers really try to say, hey, we're so scared about having a union in here. We're going to do anything to keep them out.
Interesting.
And so we definitely went in there. So if the union says, hey, they're doing an unfair labor practice, we would go in and investigate, take affidavits, and really try to determine if they were. So,
well, that's interesting timing because the other day I was reading, I saw a headline the other day that said one of the first Apple stores voted to unionize, and they shut the whole branch down.
Very malicious, yeah.
Very malicious. That's very interesting. So that would have been something that you would have gotten involved in.
We would have gotten involved and said, hey, but you have to find intent, and that's really hard. I think I talked to you when we briefly spoke about the Boeing.
Yeah.
One of our first two speakers in the labor management conference was the president of Boeing and the president of the aerospace union, got together to talk. But at the time, they were going through some really...
it made the news. I mean, they're over on the West Coast. I heard about it.
Yeah, and so were you on the West Coast that you said? And I think they shut down the facility and I'm making some of this up, but they shut down the facility in Washington, but they were moving the plant to North Carolina.
Right.
And it's unlawful to move it with the intent to avoid the union. Is it lawful to move it because of better prices, better atmosphere, better laws? Sure. But if you're moving it to avoid the union, or in Apple's case, that's unlawful. So a lot of it's intent, and that's hard to prove.
Well, I was about to say, intent is a really hard thing to prove.
Really, really hard thing. And so I will say, you see those type of people are scared. People don't want the union, so and you'll even see, I think I had a case where a client said, or not a client, a company said, we will shut this place down if the union wins. That's an unfair labor practice. How does it affect the vote, though? So does that mean we go in and say, you can't say that, and we slap their hand, which sometimes the labor laws are a little weak, and they say, okay, we still have the election now, but they're not allowed to say that. Is that enough that the employees like, oh yeah, they're really not going to shut it down now? Some employees are so scared they're going to lose their job. So how their company's actions affect they call it a sterile election environment, is up for debate too. Is it bad enough actions? Have they done something so malicious, to your question, that we need to just say, we can't have a fair election. We have to have the union come in. They win. Which is hard. That doesn't happen a lot, but they could. That you have to bargain with them.
Interesting. So say I am a business owner that is kind of facing this upcoming vote. What is what's kind of like going through their mind right there, and like what both in the perspective of the people who are voting and the people who are owning and running this business.
And I can put two hats on here. I can put my management attorney hat on, because that's where I get the call from the company to answer that question. We're scared. We hear this chatter. We've seen flyers, we've heard people in the break room. And I go through usually a do's and do not kind of tips, I call it. You can't threaten. You can't threaten anything. Like, you can't threaten that we're going to close the shop or you're going to lose your job. You can't interrogate employees. So you can't say, how are you going to vote? What's your idea about the union? You can't make promises like, we promise we'll give better benefits if you just vote no. And then you can't surveil. You can't go watch them and secretly try to figure out what they're doing. So those, I call them tips, and that's not new to me. That's what a lot of labor attorneys deal with. But what's going through their head is, in my mind, what's going to happen if we have to have a third party in the middle of us. How is that going to affect our HR, our human resources, our ability to connect with the employee? How's that going to affect our everyday operation where we can't go directly to the employee? Because that's really what having a bargaining agent happens. You can't go directly to that employee and negotiate not only just what vacation you're going to get, but how we kind of manage our workforce. And so I do believe, truly, it's a scary thing for clients that they say, we're going to have this third party that everything we do, we're going to have to go and ask them, can we do this? Is it part of what's the contract say? What are we allowed to do? And if we don't like what the answer is, do we have to wait till this contract expires? Do we have to do something that's going to cause us to have a ULP because we've not bargained over something? It's as simple as if you currently pay your employees a direct check every day or every week, and you want to change it to a direct deposit. That's a change in their working conditions. You would have to bargain that with the union. And that seems so simple. And I'm like, who would care? Well, guess what? Some people might. And so guess what? If that's a change in their working conditions, you're going to have to bargain with the union. And that's hard for a company, particularly a small business owner. Is that the way your question started? Is someone who started this company, they're on their own. They did this. They don't need a third party to tell them how to run their business.
Yeah. So then what would you say you've seen have been some particularly like if I'm trying to give empathy to the people running these businesses, have you ever seen moments when unions came into play that felt particularly unfair to the way that the business was being run? Because if that's true, that feels like counter to the narrative that you hear most of the time. Right.
And that's my other hat, my putting on that when we have this labor management conference, if they're in there, we want them to be cooperative. I have to say, usually my role, particularly at the National Labor Relations Board, was not, once the union's in, there's not as many ULPs, they kind of have to work it out. It's a contract, whatever's in the contract. And it's a breach of contract or not a breach of contract. But as a representing clients, I'm trying to think of a one that I definitely have seen unions give a really difficult pushback. In this one specific case where my client was trying to rearrange their operations and how they literally ran their business deliveries. It was basically, they brought in some new AI type stuff that was going to redevelop, or I'm not saying this correctly, but reconfigure, that's the word I'm working, how the delivery, and it was going to definitely lose some employees. And how it would be much more economically sound to do it this way. They had done some consulting with it, and the union was like, no. Well, one, it was going to have employees be laid off, which is a procedure the contract had, but they basically were arguing that it was an unlawful, change of a condition of employment to reroute these people, and it just was smarter. It was a business decision, right? And some people who have management rights clauses in their contract that management rights have, but some of them it's not very broad. Some of them are not as well written. And this one, the union was like, no, you don't have the management rights to do this, right? We don't want you to do this.
Crazy.
And they had filed a ULP, and I was like, gosh, we just want to run our business the best way. And that could be it. But on the other side, and I'll put on my other hat, is it was going to take away some jobs, right? And it was going to be harder on the employees doing the routes, if I can remember correctly, just the way it was configured. So, that's what the union's job is, to look out for the employees.
You're great at what you do. Your clients trust you, your team respects you, but online you're practically invisible. And while your head's down doing great work, your competitors keep showing up where you aren't. And we get it. You have great ideas for content. The process is just really hard. So at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio, we help trusted leaders like you become a recognized face through video podcasting. So your reputation online finally matches the one you've already earned in the room. It works in 3 steps. Book a discovery call, we'll create a plan together, and then you show up and talk. That's it. We handle everything else. The production, the editing, and the strategy. And with just a few sessions a month in the studio, you can show up every time your clients are online. So by the time your potential client reaches out, you're already the obvious choice. You were never hard to trust. You were just hard to find. Book a discovery call at cincinnatipodcaststudio.com. Well, that's incredibly timely because that's the majority of the conversation that's happening right now around AI is this idea of job loss. So I think that's actually kind of interesting. Like, I want to get to this, but actually before we get there, let's talk the people who are unionizing perspective.
Okay.
Like, what's a story that you've seen that was more egregious in the way that the company was acting?
Well, I'll tell you one of my first case at the labor board, and it wasn't such an egregious. It's kind of funny when you look back at it, but I can see the threat the employees felt. I will say, generally, I do see where companies, and this is what I taught today in class, a non-union company can fire you for any reason or no reason at all. You're an employee at will, and they don't have to have a good reason. One of the strongest arguments for a union setting is they're no longer employees at will. They have to have cause for termination, and cause is at least, progressive discipline, notice of your, why you were terminated, in the sense of you can't just say you're late, you're fired. Now, I'm not an employee at will either because I work for the state. But if my law firm, I'm an employee at will at my law firm, and if they say, hey, you're late too much, you're fired, they don't need to give me a reason. They don't need to give me multiple chances and a write-up and then a suspension, right? But typically in an employment setting. So when putting on the hat of that employee, they probably feel so powerless in a setting where a company can just come in and fire them for any reason at all. Maybe they've seen that. I have to say, in a couple instances I've heard where clients are like, or employees would be like, hey, we just see this person over here got fired and we're scared we're next, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I will tell you a funny story. My first case alone as an attorney for the labor board, it was this small town down in Kentucky, and there was one big employer, and the owner of the company drove this gigantic Cadillac, okay? It was very well recognized that... And anyway, the union was in there, and the union was trying to stir up some support, and they had put up a flyer, and I think one of the employees internally had started to pass out flyers that they were meeting at the Holiday Inn. There was one Holiday Inn in town, and right next to the Holiday Inn was a Subway. And like a Subway at a gas station where you and it's all glass and you can see. Well, the owner in his big Cadillac sat his car at that Subway and did eat. I mean, there's definitely evidence that he ate and ordered sandwiches, but he sat there and watched everybody coming and going into into the Holiday Inn. Now, again, this is, you think back to my tips I just told you, no threats, interrogation, promises, and surveillance. And basically, they're scared to death, right? Those employees, the ones I went down and took statements from, like, yeah, he knew who we were. He knew that Joe and Anna and Allie, whoever, went into that meeting, and we were scared. And it got out very quickly that this president was sitting there, and he's like, I was just eating. I was just at the one Subway in town.
Oh my God.
Which he was, right?
Oh,
but
man.
Was the intent to scare. And so, to them, that was one of those times where, was it egregious enough that we could say there wouldn't be a fair election and the union just has to win? Or that the company has to put up a notice that says, we will not, threaten you in any way. You are allowed to vote, however you want. There's no repercussions. And that's what ended up winning. I mean, that's again, the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act, had little teeth, and the teeth come and go depending on what president's in the office. But at the time, it has not as much teeth when all you have to do is put up a notice and say, sorry, we won't threaten you. Go ahead and vote whatever way you want.
Which feels like a bit of an empty promise.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I do see the employees, most of the time, benefits are a big thing, right? And working hours. If they find that other companies have better benefits and there's no way for them to talk to their employer about that, union seems like the best choice.
So then you take this jump from when you guys move and you come up here and become more of a corporate lawyer. What was that like for you? Like, kind of making that shift from government to...
Oh, it was big. It was very different because now I really became, my clients, 99% of my clients now are HR directors, right? or even sometimes general counsels of companies, but their HR director is calling me for help on how to handle, a termination, how to handle, I want to fire this person, can I? And I was about to say, and I think this really goes into this nicely, is, I really have to put on that HR hat and be like, hey, if you're a good HR person, you're not going to need me. And your employees aren't going to need unions, right? Mm-hmm. If you have that open communication, and your employees are going to feel like they don't need a third party because they can come and talk to you about benefits. They can come and talk to you about being fired. And so the more open communication you have with your employees, the less likely they're going to want a union. And then back to your question about when I came up here, it wasn't all legal work answers I was giving them. It was more like, hey, why don't you go back to those employees and talk to them about things, and if they were scared about unions and things like that. So the best way to avoid a union is for a company is to just have great communication with their employees and be really proactive. And that's what I think I remember from my dad too, but be proactive in their engagement with them. But making that move, I really just became, I didn't do a lot of litigation. I wasn't in the courtroom a lot because most of ours is that front end of, hey, we need to let this person go, or this person's struggling with FMLA issues. This person's struggling with, are we having a harassment complaint? How do we handle it? So I was doing a lot of counseling when I got back, and from a corporate standpoint, and really helping them try to find solutions to their HR problems.
So now you're kind of in this space where you're kind of doing alternative dispute resolution. Mm-hmm. Like, help me understand what that even means.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of law firms have ADR centers within law firms themselves, but ADR stands for Alternative Dispute Resolutions, and that typically includes arbitration and mediation. So arbitration is a binding process where two parties, typically in a contract, usually unions, have agreed that we agree not to go to court over this, that we will arbitrate our disputes. Okay, so in a union contract, that happens, and someone's fired from a union setting. They file a grievance with their employer, and the employer says, nope, we're allowed to fire you. And the union takes it up, their grievance process, and eventually they say, okay, we're going to have an arbitrator decide if I was wrongfully terminated. And so it's a binding decision. They pick an arbitrator, and this arbitrator, it's basically a mini court case. I can't explain it any better than a mini hearing, and both sides get to present evidence, the company and the union on behalf of the employee, and then an arbitrator makes a decision, and it's final. You don't get to appeal it into a court, and if he says they're wrongfully fired, they're fired. So I, at the law firm, would represent the company in arbitration matters. So we would go to arbitration and argue that we made a good decision. That sometimes was very personal because I had counseled them through those decisions, right? Mm-hmm. They had called me and said, can we fire this person? I would say, yes, let's do it, right? Go, you do it. I'll come back and help you later if they fight it. But we would then arbitrate that, and it was personal because sometimes I would be worried that my decision would be, not good for him. The mediation, though, is really where my heart is, and where our center, the ADR center at NKU, uses most of its time. So mediation is not binding, but the parties agree that we'll let a neutral mediator help us resolve our disputes. It happens in a lot of other areas, not just union settings. In fact, all employment settings, all commercial, corporate, you use these for construction contract disputes. You use them for family, a lot of family disputes, and use mediation, custody disputes, divorce settlements, property agreements. So, and mediators are just there to help try to keep it out of the courtroom. And there's a lot of different techniques in mediation, but to use those different styles to try to get the parties to communicate, engage, and reach a resolution. So the center at NKU started 12 or 15 years ago now, I guess, doing my math right, as a way to use our board, which a lot of times is faculty members, but some non-faculty, but mainly faculty members. We have faculty members from the communication department, Chase Law School, the business school, and to act as mediators if parties need it. So we try to be more of a low-cost mediation service in the community. And if they call us and say, hey, I need a mediator, we try to find one. And our Small Business Institute writes our center into their contracts. And so, if the partnership has a dispute on why they're breaking up or something else, we're supposed to come in and help mediate those conflicts. So a few years ago, we started doing full mediation, 40-hour mediation trainings for people to become mediators. And there's a really big need for that. Again, particularly in the family law atmosphere. Just so many people needing multiple days of sitting down. I mean, going through divorce and going through, the child custody issues, and all the way from, who's going to pick up the kid at soccer practice and who's going to pay for the soccer, you name it. And it's hard for a court to get into that. It's really hard to litigate that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what the ADR Center kind of has transformed into. Running this conference and training mediators, trying to resolve disputes, encouraging conflict resolution. And so
that's interesting, the differences between like mediation and arbitration.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing in my head is like mediation sounds like a great idea, except why choose it over arbitration if it's not binding?
Yeah, well, sometimes it's scary to choose binding arbitration. So you need both parties to agree to it, right? And so both parties agree to mediation. If one's hesitant, they walk out of there, they don't have to have settled anything. They might have just wasted their entire day, but they can walk out of there and say, okay, we're going to court, right? And so there's still that opportunity left if they don't like what's going to happen. So you have to, I think to go to arbitration, you have to be fairly confident, and you have to be confident too that if it goes against your, it doesn't go your way, you're going to be, okay, I can handle it. But mediation is just less scary, for lack of a better word, because no one is going to make you walk away from it. So I always say it's a win. I say it's a win-win. You go in there and, you might find out some evidence, from the other side. You might get to hear, sometimes people just want to talk and let the other side hear them, why they're upset, why they're angry. And once that's off their chest, they feel better. And, you're not going through lengthy courtroom discussions and, litigation. And so I say it's a win-win for both parties, but some people say it's a lose-lose, because if I went in there thinking I was wrongfully terminated and I deserve $1 million, and my company walks in and says, I don't think they deserve anything, right? So at the end, if we've settled on $20,000, I feel slighted because I didn't get my full amount, and my company's mad because they're paying something. So it's a lose-lose. Yeah. You don't have a real winner either. But I think that's the point of ADR. We're trying to resolve it. Not everyone's going to win all the time, which in arbitration, someone wins and someone loses, right?
So then walk me through kind of a situation where you're specifically dealing with a conflict between management and labor, and like it's particularly contentious when they kind of walk into the room. What do you do to try to bring down the temperature
as a mediator?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to think of a recent case that I could even give some good examples, but a lot of mediators do not let you do an opening statement. When I say that, and we just did this training. So these 40-hour trainings I'm talking about that the ADR Center runs, we have tons of professionals get up and speak about their philosophy of mediation, because it is definitely personal, right? Lou Manchisi, who this conference is named after, the Lou Manchisi Conference, he was a federal mediator. He worked for FMCS, and he is a transformative mediator, okay? He uses some qualities of trying to really get at some emotional side of people. I'm an evaluative mediator. That's the lawyer in me. I look at both sides and evaluate. You're not going to win very much, and you're going to probably lose. And I evaluate. Lou does not evaluate. So we are two very different people. But this training we had really worked through some of these. People say, I don't like opening statements. I don't want people in the same room because all it does is just cause conflict right at the beginning. But you ask me what I do. I like opening statements. I like people coming in. I tell my both sides, I'm going to give you an opportunity. And it doesn't have to be the lawyer that does the opening statement. The union probably has a lawyer. Sometimes they don't. The company almost always does. And it can just be the person that feels, aggrieved. And if they just say it in front of the other people, I have felt multiple times that has kind of calmed things down a little. They feel better that they got to say what they wanted to say. Now, I think it's probably can go the opposite way too. It makes the other side mad.
Yeah.
But if you have enough ability to understand that they are, there to tell their side, I like for the parties to start and try to have this opening statement. People don't agree with that. There's a lot of mediators that don't do that. They just start them in separate rooms and they never see each other. But I feel like a contentious situation, it just kind of maybe cools things down for me. But it could go the opposite way, right?
Well, I'm assuming this is some of the stuff that you guys talk about at the conference. So
yes.
Tell me a little bit more about Lou's conference.
Yeah.
43 years going now.
And he has been there for all 43 of them. He started it as a federal mediator, like I told you. And I will say, if Lou's federal mediation days, lots of stories. Federal mediation, and this used to be in conjunction with FMCS because in the recent FMCS stands for Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services. It's a federal agency. Technically, it's still in existence, but during the downsizing in the last year, it is one of the agencies that has been kind of, yes. So, but the FMCS where Lou worked is the agency that's brought into, like, if Major League Baseball union has problem, FMCS mediators, and Lou was one of them. He's been in MLB negotiations. He's been sent out to California for, it was a union strike on, I don't know, some type of barges out there. Anyway, big time ones, okay? So Lou started this. Again, in his profession, he saw the need to bringing both sides together. And I've worn this hat on both sides too, but really to try to promote collaboration, right? And, but mediation's the heart of it. In fact, one of our topics, one of our speakers or a group of our speakers will talk about how to do arbitration and how to do mediation effectively. And it really works well for our participants. And our participants at this conference can be general counsels of these companies and HR professionals, all the way to union representatives, rank and file union stewards and employees. They're all brought in the same room. So we typically, our speakers have a management side speaker, a labor side speaker, and sometimes a neutral, a person who really doesn't represent either. So we have both sides of that. So how do you prepare for mediation is probably very different for the union side and then the management side. And not too different at times, but what you're looking for in an arbitration could be very different. So we try to, our panels and our workshops, try to have someone on each side of the aisle to bring perspectives for everybody.
Then who would you say is kind of like the perfect person to walk into this event?
Can I give two people, perfect people?
Yeah.
An HR professional for sure. Someone that is dealing with these issues and having to be the one to work through communication conflicts. That HR professional works with the supervisor and the employee who are fighting, right? And so that HR professional is a perfect person to come and kind of see both sides of it, right? Even though they're management themselves, they want that conflict to be resolved. But then the other person is, like I said, when I say rank and file, that's not derogatory to sense, but it's just your employee. He doesn't have to be a supervisor. He doesn't have to be the general counsel, and he doesn't have to be the HR professional. But an employee to see the perspective that management has at times, and even their union representatives have at times, and representing them, and then management being represented by the HR side of things. But I really like to see an HR professional and an employee get together and kind of listen to our panelists and listen to the discussions.
So I think one of the things then that I'm kind of curious about, and I'm sure that you guys have taught this over the years of doing this, but like, what are some of the biggest pitfalls that you just wish people, like businesses, would pay attention to? Like that these are the things you keep seeing showing up inside of your mediation services or like...
I was going to say our pitfall at our conference, we don't get too political. That's our number one pitfall at these conferences. Like we have our speaker, we don't, because definitely bring both sides of the aisle, and our attendees definitely cross over. And so I always like, we don't need to get political. Yes, you both have your sides that you're on. We know that you represent the unions a lot and you represent management, but we don't need to get political. And every once in a while I sit and listen to the speaker, I'm like, oh no, are they getting too political? But the biggest pitfall if I was a mediator, what I see, and please take this that I'm an employment lawyer though, right? That's a corporate employment side of things, is I just see employers not being consistent in how they treat employees. And when I say that, this is a pretty simple example, but you have the female and the male, and the female comes in late 4 times and is fired, and the male comes in late 5 times and isn't fired, right? And maybe there's a host of other things, but this employee will really latch on, the female employee will really latch on to say, hey, you're not fair. You're not treating us all the same. And it's clearly not then because of that I'm late, it's because I'm a female. Right. And so that's a pretty basic example. But my point is just that consistent treatment of every one of your employees. And that's hard sometimes. It's really hard. And I have to always go back when someone says, hey, can I fire this person? Like, what did you do to the last 10 people that did this? Right. Was there someone else that engaged in the same activity? How else did you treat someone who had a request for time off? How else did you how did you treat an employee who needed a leave of absence? And so they call me and they want to give one, fine. Or they don't want to give one, fine. But how did you treat other people? Because one, it could show that it's, discriminatory based upon, race or sex or national origin, whatever. But it also gets employees angry. And that's where you start to have those bad relationships of when, hey, this isn't fair. And they might not always like it. I tell my clients, and then I can see in mediations, they might not always like every answer, but as long as you're fair and consistent, you're going to have a lot more respect from your employees, and they're going to know what to expect.
That makes sense. And so you would say that the majority of these situations arise because processes aren't in place, or even, let's say, the employee handbook wasn't being followed. Or
that's a big one. Like, if you have it, follow it, because it makes it look like you're doing discipline or terminations for some other reason. Again, if you're an employee at will, we started that out. You can fire someone for any reason or no reason at all. But if it doesn't follow your handbook, it looks really suspicious. And it's not fair. And the employee's like, hey, you don't even follow the handbook. So that's one of my biggest takeaways when I do trainings. And if I am a mediator, it looks, you didn't do this in the past. Why are you doing it now? Or you've treated people differently. It doesn't look, why are you doing that now? So.
And then usually the times when they feel like they're acting, like the business is acting really far out of character, is probably for some reasons that they're not wanting to share, or
exactly.
Yes.
There's something underlying it that we don't know, and so it looks suspicious, right?
Yeah.
And it causes people to be angry. But that's where I've seen even talks of unions pop up. Like, hey, this isn't fair. They're not. Or they're not communicating why they're making changes or why they're doing things, and they're being secretive. It's really bad, right? Just be honest. It might not always be they want to hear, but it's better than not communicating with them.
So then when people come to the conference, what is kind of the thing that you're hoping that they leave with?
I hope that they've been able to sit in a room with management, union reps, sit at different tables and just hear both perspectives and really focus on how things will be better in the workplace if they can work cooperatively and communicate with each other before they go to file litigation, or just throw down the contract. And I've definitely seen, there's a union rep who I work with pretty regularly who is really into having those one-on-one discussions with the management. And, it doesn't have to be so formal. It can just be in this, we eat lunch together. We have, we go into rooms, we break out rooms together. There's an opportunity for both sides to kind of talk and and engage with each other. So that's what I really want to take away is they sit down and it's not at a work setting. It's not in the workplace. Like this is outside the workplace and we're all, in the, just enjoying it together. I had an example. One of my speakers said he was at just Hidden Heads with a company attorney. He was a union attorney. It was Hidden Heads. And they were in negotiations over something. And then they ended up going to church and they walked in the same church together. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have these shared interests. Like, you know what I mean? They were both fill in the blank, Jewish, Catholic. Anyway, you know what I mean? They both like, oh my gosh, we have some shared interests. And so I think that's something that, I would hope they take away from this conference, that they have some shared interests. They definitely are from different perspectives, but they can use those shared interests to get along better.
Well, I think the title, and I want to look up to make sure that this is right. It says, turning conflict into cooperative progress. So is that what you're defining as cooperative progress? Is kind of this understanding of, hey, we're both human. We both need to talk to each other on the same level.
That's a great way. Maybe I should change the topic to that too, or I put a sentence underneath it. Yes, that you're progressing in our relationship. I know we're going to definitely have our differences, but if we make some progress in this and communicating better, recognizing our similarities, recognizing, I'll give you one more example. Recognizing progress. One of our topics every year is employment law, and every year is labor law update. It's kind of boring, but they just go through the most recent, legal cases. But I remember one of my participants saying, there was a new case that came out that changed the way FMLA and ADA kind of worked with each other. And she's like, hey, I'm glad I listened to that. I understand why they didn't let me get that leave for this employee. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, there's some understanding. It's not just the company saying that. Now it's, this group of people that are here to talk about it agree with it too. Do you know what I mean? Like it was like, oh yeah, it's not just my jerk company doing this, it's like a real law now.
Yeah.
And so she's like, I'm glad I listened to that. So anyway, I can see that just making some progress in the way that they engage with each other.
So then how do you, maybe this is too much of a marketing question, but how do you draw in the aggrieved party to an event like this? Because it sounds like a lot of this is developing their understanding, but I don't know if people are just going to want to walk into something like this. Yeah.
It's funny. We try to get groups of people. And many companies will send, like GE sent 20 people last year, and they tried to use it as a continuing educational opportunity for their employees. So if you find a company that is willing, we first get them, hey, are you willing to send employees here? And they might not be happy about it, but they're getting out a day of work maybe. And, we give certificates now. This is a continuing education for your employees. So I think an aggrieved party, you're right. There's some people that come in here maybe not as happy as others, but their company's encouraging them to come and pay for them to come and enjoy this atmosphere. And I think most of them, we have a lot of returnees. A lot of people come back year after year. I wish I could have the math and the numbers for you, but it's a really high percentage of return people because we try to give different topics along the same, but different types of things. And so I think it's really encouragement from their company paying for it to come is how we get them.
That makes sense. Okay, so I've got two slightly quicker questions that I want an answer to. So help me understand this. When you're watching these labor and management conversations, like conflicts, go south, what is the number one reason they fall apart?
Money. Money's at the heart of every big argument, but what's the number one real reason that they fall apart? I want to say the history between the parties. I don't know if I'm going to be saying this right. It might take me a bit to explain it. There was one mediation. It was in Indiana, and I could not do anything. I felt very hopeless as a mediator. And these parties had such a history together of anger and, upheaval that I didn't think I could do much. They kept bringing up past things. So I think what I'm getting at, I don't know if this really is all the time, but they can't let go of the past. There's this history that they can't let go of, and so they don't trust them. And there probably was a loss in trust, past negotiation, past issue, and someone didn't uphold their end of the bargain. And so I feel like if we can't regain that trust, which maybe something like this mediation conference can help them if they're back in that same room, but I can't get over that. I can't get them to change their mind on that history they had in the past of not trusting each other. That's what I've seen a few times, for me at least. Interesting.
So then what is something you believe today about dispute resolution that you didn't believe 10 years ago?
I did not think there were so many different ways to attack a problem. I really, truly, that is the truth. I was an evaluative mediator, and I thought it was silly to not be able to go in and truly tell someone, you're going to lose at court. You're going to win. You'll never be able to use this document. Don't even, I evaluate it. And I think 10 years ago, I did not see, and I still am not good at it, the value of other types of emotional connections that a mediation can bring. And I've worked on that. I've tried to really, you look at people's interests. I think to be a successful mediator, you need to know interest. And interest isn't always, winning or losing. It's, there's just different interests people might have, and you have to get to the heart of those interests. Okay. And is it, to protect their reputation? Is it money? Is it stability at their house, their own house? Is it stability at work? What is their really interest? So digging in deeper and not just evaluating the situation from a legal perspective, but really trying to interest-based mediation and trying to really figure out it does work. It works.
So would you say that you listen differently now?
Oh, yes. In fact, I have more, that should have been my answer. I'm quiet more.
Really?
And that's why I like people coming in and those mediation opening statements. Some people don't, like I said, but I sometimes just sit there and I let there be quiet and see what comes out. I am not very good at that usually. My husband will say I'm terrible at that. My kids will probably say I'm terrible at that. But in the end, I truly think that if I can listen more and try to really hear their interest, it might change the resolution. Because mediation, unlike arbitration, you asked this question before, it can have a host of different resolutions. It doesn't have to be as typical as I win, I get $1 million, you lose, or you pay this, I pay that. It can really be hey, I just want a neutral letter of reference. I'm really struggling to find a job. Yes, I think I was unlawfully fired, but if you could just help me. And I've had a client say, I'll write a letter of reference. I won't put in there that you're late every day, but I'll say that you were really good at A, B, and C, and then we'll pay for help for you for a job placement agency. Oh, okay. They don't, and that made the company happy because they were not wanting to pay him just money, but this person really needed a job. So just hearing interest, listening better. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. So if people want to come to the conference, because I believe this is going to release like a week or two before you guys are doing this. What do they need to know? Where do they get connected?
And you can register. We have walk-ins that day, but we encourage you can register the week before for sure. I think the easiest way is to just Google probably NKU ADR Center Labor Management Conference. You can put Lou Manchisi Labor Management Conference, and you could find it too. There's not any more of those in the world. And Manchisi spelled Manchise.
I was about to say, I spelled it wrong when I attempted to put it in Google.
Lou Manchisi. So just Google that and you'll find our registration site on NKU's platform. And it's an all-day event. Well, it's we have really good food. That's something else we're really known for. We have a breakfast, and then we have a keynote speaker in the beginning. Then we have breakout sessions. So 4 breakout sessions that you can pick between. So what interests you in the morning? Then we come back for a great lunch. We have a Lifetime Achievement Award. at lunchtime, and then we break out again for 4 more workshops that you get to pick from. And so it really, you can tailor your, what you like. And we have snacks throughout the day. Again, we're really good at the food. And then we come back. And I think one of the neatest things, we try to get people to stay to the end because it's a Friday. And I know people like to sneak out on a Friday, but they come back in and we give away like 3 or 4 really nice gifts. Last year, I think it was 2 iPads and something else. I can't remember all of our gifts, but so there's an incentive to stay to the end. You have to be present to win our gifts. So it's a easy way to register. Like I mentioned, there is a price break for groups of 12 and more. And so if you encourage your coworkers, hey, let's go. I've even seen a group of employees get up and say, hey, will you pay for us to go management? And like, hey, we'll all go together. So there are definitely groups of people that come and make it a day for the employees.
That's awesome. Now, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Kathy. I really learned a lot. If people are curious to learn more about you and about what you do or have questions, how could they reach out to you?
You're welcome to reach out by email is the easiest. You're welcome to give me a call, but Carnes, so CARNESK2 at nku.edu. So carnsk2 at nku.edu. My phone number is 859-572-7571. But yeah, I would love to talk to people. I love mediators call me, or people who want to be mediators call me all the time. That's a big thing we get right now just because of our training. We're the only one in Kentucky, by the way, that does this mediation training.
Oh, wow.
And so we train retired judges, we train, you don't have to be a lawyer either. The mediators, I should have said this earlier. Maybe one of the things I've learned over the 10 years, mediators come in so many different professions. That's what you bring to the table. You don't necessarily have to be a lawyer to understand interests of people, right? Mm-hmm. We have a lot of social workers that become mediators. HR professionals become mediators, but people just that like to kind of work with others, they want to become a mediator. It's a profession in Kentucky. You don't necessarily have to have another certification. If you want to do family mediations in the court system, you have to have a 40-hour course, and we're the only ones that have that right now.
Wow.
If anyone else wants to do a mediation, you want to do employment mediation, you could put out your shingle today. You don't need any training. But a lot of people reach out and ask about that at the center. So I handle calls on mediation trainings all the time.
Well, I was about to say, it sounds like you are a therapist for the entire company.
I could see that. Yeah. I always joke that I have a couch that people have to come in and sit on. Yes, that's right.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. This has been great.
This has been fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks so much for listening to the Cincinnati Business Podcast. If you like the show, the best way to support us is to like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you fantastic content just like this. And if you are a greater Cincinnati-based business owner who has something you want to share with the world, reach out to me at brian@cincinnatipodcaststudio.com.